Hello, everyone, and welcome to the WC2life Purpose Podcast. This is your host, Karen Oliver. Thank you so much for everyone and you guys' support, you guys' follows, you guys' shares. I just want to say Happy New Year. We made it. We made it to 2021. I am so glad that you guys are back with me. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad that you guys are out there listening. You guys, I just want to say that I'm excited for what 2021 is birthing, what 2021 is bringing to us, how we're stepping out, how we're still keep going. And you guys, I'm just happy to be back recording another episode with you guys. Actually, the first episode of 2021. So you guys know that we um always put out a new episode on Thursdays and we have live interviews on Fridays or whatever day our guests can come in, but a new episode is always uploaded on Thursdays every week or every other Thursday. So you guys, this month, this year, January 2021, we are talking about promise. That is just such a God. It's a big word. When you think of promise, I know a lot of things are running through your mind, like, promise, promises. We all know that we have a promise to keep. We know that there is promises that others made to that made to us. There's promises that we've made to our own selves that we didn't keep. But I do believe in this year in 2021, the promises that were made, the promises that we wrote down, the visions that we wrote down are going to stick. And you know why the promises is going to stick? Because we are passionate about the promise. And promise is a word that goes a long way. Promises can be good and promises can be bad. And so let's talk about promise today, wherever you are this afternoon, tonight, in the morning, wherever area or whatever country you're listening from. Thank you so much for tuning to the WC's Life Purpose podcast on this evening. And we're going to get into the the power of promise and what promise means to us and how promise can be good or bad. And so we're going to look up we're going to talk about, just the definition of promise just a little bit. We want to talk about promise. Okay, so promise in my own words, before we go to the regular definition or natural definition, promise to me is like when someone makes a commitment. You guys know that commitment is very big. That is pretty much what I drive in my life and health coaching, in my brand, and everything that I do. Even on this podcast, we always strive to drive commitment. And so, in my own words, promise means a commitment that you make to someone, or a commitment that you make to yourself, or someone other than you that has made a commitment to you. Um, a promise that they are going to stick to whatever the promise is, that the promise is going to come to pass, that it's going to stick, that whatever the promise that was that you made, or whatever the promise is that someone else made to you, you know that it's laid out and that it's going to stick. So, a promise is something that you're looking forward to. So, when I think of commitment, I'm also thinking of hope. That is something that I'm hoping for. That is something that I know that is going to happen. And it may not happen yet, but I know it's going to happen because this was promised to me, or this is a promise that I made to myself. So, I know that it has to be complete. So, let's look at the natural definition of promise and let's see what it says about promise. I hope you guys are doing great on this afternoon, tonight, in the morning, wherever you are. And so let's look at the regular definition of promise. Promise is a declaration. So the dictionary says the promise is a declaration that one will do or refrain from doing something specified. Okay. And let's look up another regular definition. A definition, again, a declaration that something will or will not be done, given by one, unkept political promises. Aha. Just as I explained in my own words a few minutes ago, what I thought promise meant to me in my own words. as the definition in the regular dictionary had stated, that it's a promise that something will happen or something won't happen. Basically, so they're saying something that is going a declaration that something will or will not be done, given or by one unkept political promises. And so it also states that a promise is a proxy for a value not necessarily known when the promise is created. It allows you to associate handlers and actions, eventual success, value, or failure. And so when we talk about promise, we talk about the initial state of something. We're talking about it, the promise being fulfilled, or the promise is going to be rejected, or the promise is pending, or the promise is delayed. So I want to know, what does promise mean to you? What is your promise? So I talked a little bit about in my own words what promise meant. And the purpose of the topic of promise on this month is because I know that we have stepped into a new year of 2021. We have gotten over the hump, the beginning stages, the middle stages of what we had to endure and go through, as far as, the pandemic, recession, um, etc, you name it, things that just been happening all over the world. But we also found out in 2020 that there was things about ourselves, and that were things that we needed to be done, that we needed to get started. So we say that everything took a halt, but in other words, everything took a halt so we could get up to speed to what we needed to do, if that makes sense. And so when I think of promise, the promise that we want to know is a promise that is going to be fulfilled. The promise that we want to that we've made to ourselves is the promise that we want to keep. So promise in 2021, which I encourage you with this promise, there have been, well, let me just go back a little bit. There have been promises that were unkept. There have been promises that was rejected, as stated in the regular dictionary. But those promises that were made may have been coming from somewhere else, or we may have made promises that we didn't even recognize that we didn't need to make a promise about. It could have been something or someone that we made a promise to or about, that we shouldn't even made a promise about. And so it doesn't fall in line with our purpose. And so that's why the promise was unkept, or that's why the promise was failed. But the promise that needs to be fulfilled in our life is the promises that we need to run with. So the promise that impacts my purpose, the promise that fulfills my destiny, the promise that says yes, and not that I can't do it. Not the promise that says I can't do it and I won't do it and I'll never be anything, but the promises that says yes. The promises that says yes, you can fulfill um your success in life. You can soar in success in life. The promise that says you can do it. The promise that says walk in your purpose now. The promise that says I can do all things if I put my mind to it, if I believe in myself, if I believe in others as well as others believe in me. Sometimes you got to believe in yourself first before you can even believe in others. You got to believe in something. You got to believe in the promise that was made, the promise that was written down, your vision, whatever that was told to you, whatever your passion lies in. You got to believe in that, or guess what? The promise is not going to succeed. The promise is going to fail. The promise is going to be rejected. But the promises that we want to succeed, and the promises that we want to be fulfilled in our life, is the promises that we got to say yes to. And so if there was a promise, and then guess what? There was a commitment. If there wasn't a commitment to it, and guess what? And then there wasn't a promise. Because before that promise in your life can happen, you have to be able to believe, succeed, and commit to it. And you got to know that it is the right promise for you. Because sometimes we can fulfill promises, for ourselves or for others, and we realize that's something that shouldn't have never taken place. And sometimes we, again, as you guys have heard me say this before on the podcast, stepping back to reevaluate ourselves and be like, did I just say that? Did I just do that? That is not what I'm supposed to be doing in life. That is not my motivation in life. That is not what I'm going to carry out in the world for the future. This promise that I need to fulfill now is what I'm going to carry out for the future. This promise is what's going to leave a legacy behind for my children and children's children. So that's the promises that we need to keep. So again, as I said before, there are promises that are good and then there are promises that are not good. But the promises that you need to run with is the promise that your purpose lies in, the promise that says success is yours, the promise that says I can do it and I can achieve it, and I know that I can take from it. Not only that, that someone in the community, someone in the world can take from this, because my promise is my success, if that makes sense. My promise is my success. And guess what? I'm committed to success. So guess what? I'm committed to promise. So the promise has no other choice but to be fulfilled. So if there was promises that were rejected, if there were promises that were failed in life, and sometimes we go through those things, and then guess what? Those promises that were made or that you made was not meant for you to keep. Those promises that were made that were rejected, you didn't fulfill those promises, or you didn't keep at it. You didn't fulfill it the way you need to fulfill it in life. So therefore it rejected. And most times there are the promises that were made and the promises that were made to us. Sometimes, wait a minute, I'm not only saying that promises get fulfilled or they either get rejected or fail, but also there's a third area. Sometimes promises are just delayed and are pending. As the state of the dictionary has said earlier, that some promises are delayed. And that's why that kind of touches on what I said. When it says that the promise is either delayed or pending, is meaning that you have put the promise on hold. So the promise is yours and the success is going to be yours and it can be fulfilled. But guess what? The reason why the promise is delayed or pending, because you have halted on it. You stopped on your promise and you're like, okay, well, I don't even really think this is for me. What do you believe? What does your passion say? What does your future say about it? And because it has not happened yet, guess what? The promise is waiting on you. The promise is waiting on you, and that's why it's delayed. That's why you know that it's still pending, because it's waiting for you to get started. And so until you fulfill your promise, that's the only way that it's going to succeed. And so we have either the promise is going to be fulfilled, either the promises is going to succeed. Succeed and fulfilled is the same thing. Secondly, either the promises has been rejected or it's failed, or thirdly, either the promise is delayed or it's still pending. And again, delayed and pending means you're sitting on your promise and you're not acting it out. You're not walking in it. You're not walking in your purpose. You're not walking in what you need to do. And so until you do that, and then it's always going to be pending, it's always going to be delayed. But in 2021, I want to encourage you that the promise that you need is a promise that says success behind it. It says yes. It says I can do it. I can achieve it. I will get started. I will take one step at a time. And I will flourish in 2021. That is the promise that you need to know that will be fulfilled and will succeed in your life. Because as much as you believe in it, as much as you believe in yourself, it doesn't matter if anybody else does not believe it. If there was a promise that you have made to yourself to get fulfilled, you need to get started. You need to succeed at it. And if you're in the area or in the category where it's pending or it's delayed, guess what? It's time to move. So if you don't move, and then the promise is not going to succeed, the promise is not going to grow, the promise is going to say I'm stuck and I'm confused. And so until then, it's going to say those things and you're going to be stagnated where you are. So you got to get moving so the promises can be fulfilled in your life. And I do believe in 2021, the promises are yes. And and I hear success. So the promises that we want to fall in line is, yes, I will succeed. Yes, I will succeed. That is the promises that is going to be fulfilled in my life. Whatever you're called to do, whatever you need to do, however you need to do it, whatever changes you need to make, um, whether you need to get organized, whether you need to get started with investing this amount of money into this over here, is different ways to get started. So your promise can be fulfilled. And so you can say, yes, I did it. Yes, it was not easy, but I still did it. Because it will be a process, but know that your promise is yours. So it's up to you to keep that promise and make that promise happen in your life. Um, you know, just a little bit of a testimony of mine. I remember a time where I was kind of stagnated with some areas in my life for a couple of years, about 5 years. And I said to myself, I always knew that these are the things that I wanted. I know that these things on my list was promised to me, but I had to realize and take a step back, you guys, and realize, okay, I stopped dreaming of those promises. And so everything was at a halt. So there was a time in my life where my promise was pending and delayed because I felt like things needed to progress faster. But it started with me first, and it started with me believing in myself again and believing that I could fulfill and succeed these things, believing that I was worth doing these things in life that I was called to do. And so I mean, I had to do another mind check. Like I had to get another mindset intact and realize that now wait a minute now. Come on now. Karen, let's get back on it. Let's get back on track. And those are some of the things that we've got to acknowledge and realize. Sometimes we don't want to acknowledge them, but until we can push forward, that's what we got to do. Yes, these promises are still here for me. But guess what? The promise is waiting on me. And so I got to get started and I got to get moving, if that helps. And so, you guys, I'm excited about this topic on this month. And yes, I was here to kick you guys off with what we're going to be talking about, what we're going to be discussing. Um, and hopefully, we will have some guests come on this month. I will always let you guys know ahead of time of who's coming to interview with us on the WC to Life Purpose podcast. But I'm very, very grateful to be doing this topic, to be discussing this topic with you all. And I hope that you guys receive some insight from it. And I am excited for you. I'm excited for each and every one of you and what 2021 is going to bring. Again, I am excited to hear your promise. We want to hear your story. We want to know, we want to hear, the testimonies of what's going on and what's happening, in your life and how you're achieving your goals, how you are succeeding at your promise. So, again, remember the promise is waiting on you. And sometimes we got to go back to what we said we were going to do and what was said. And we got to make sure that it matches up with our purpose. And we got to make sure that it matches up with our commitment. And we got to make sure that we're committed to it. So, you guys, thank you so much for coming back and listening to the WC to Life Purpose podcast. Thank you for sharing and thank you for following. Thank you for being a support, all you out there who has been a support and who has gave recommendations or gave feedback on the podcast. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us. And we will be here again for another episode next week. And I just want to encourage you guys to keep working. Keep working and never stop. Everybody take care. Bye bye.